The distress signal was garbled, a whisper from the abyss of space. Mayday, colony under, unnatural presence. Then silence. Commander Elias Voss tightened his grip on the armrest of his seat. The bridge of the Valkyrie was bathed in the cold blue light of emergency protocols. The colony on Ganymede 6 had gone dark 3 days ago, and now this broken transmission was the only clue they had. The last official report had declared the colony stable, its mining operations thriving. Now, a full military recon was inbound. Lieutenant ETA? Elias asked. 2 minutes, sir. Orbit insertion now, Lieutenant Arya Rains replied. The planet loomed large on the hollow screen, a scarred rock half-drowned in perpetual storm clouds. A planet that should have been uninhabitable, yet there was life. Too much life. As the Valkyrie drew closer, the onboard scanners pulsed with disturbing readings. The colony wasn't just operational, it was thriving in a way that defied logic. The structures had expanded, spreading like an unchecked virus, glowing with eerie bioluminescence. Towering spires, not of human construction, pulsed with an organic shimmer. Something had changed. Something had grown. Elias exchanged a look with Arya. Prep the fire team. We're going in hot. The descent. The drop ship shuddered violently as it breached the atmosphere. The storms howled against the hull, clawing at the reinforced plating with fingers of electrical fury. Elias sat at the front, his pulse steady but his mind a battlefield of instincts. His team, 5 of the best Marines the Interstellar Authority had to offer, sat ready, weapons locked and loaded. Sergeant Cole Bannon checked his rifle. I don't like this, boss. Colony goes dark, then suddenly it's bigger? Smells like a goddamn trap? Elias didn't disagree. Stay sharp. No unnecessary risks. The ship bucked hard as they punched through the storm and broke into clear skies. The sight below stole the breath from every soldier on board. The colony had mutated. The prefabricated structures were barely recognizable beneath the layers of something alive. Pulsing veins of light coursed through the metal, creeping up walls like vines, connecting every building in a grotesque web of flesh and circuitry. The landing zone, a supposed supply dock, was overgrown, the steel plating cracked and displaced by an otherworldly growth that writhed as though breathing. Elias clenched his jaw. Weapons free. Anything that moves without a heat signature, burn it. The doors hissed open, and the team spilled onto the landing pad, weapons sweeping the area. The air was thick with humidity, carrying a scent that was both metallic and organic. Then came the whisper. Not from comms. Not from their suits. Inside their heads. You have come to witness the divine. Private Niles cursed, spinning in place. Commander, did you? You are welcome among us. The voice slithered through their minds like a serpent in the dark. It was not human. Not mechanical. Something else. Elias swallowed hard. Stay close. Move in. The colony that shouldn't be. The first bodies appeared near the entrance to the central hub. At least, they had been bodies. What remained of the colonists was fused into the walls, their flesh stretched and pulled taut, their faces frozen in expressions of bliss. Their chests rose and fell as if they were still alive, yet their eyes were glassy, unfocused. Jesus Christ, Arya whispered. Sergeant Bannon stepped closer, rifle raised. They're breathing. How the hell are they still breathing? The wall behind them shifted. Elias barely had time to bark a warning before something peeled itself free from the structure. A humanoid shape, once a man but now twisted, skin fused with the pulsating growth, fingers elongated into tendrils. Its face was smooth, featureless, except for a single, gaping hole where the mouth should have been. It screamed without making a sound. The team opened fire. Bullets tore into the creature, black ichor spraying from the wounds, but it didn't fall. It absorbed the damage, the holes in its body sealing almost instantly. Burn it! Elias shouted. Arya raised her flamethrower and let loose. The creature convulsed violently, screeching in silent agony as fire consumed it. Within moments, it was nothing but ash. The whispers returned. You reject the gift. The walls breathed, and more figures began to pull themselves free. Elias turned to his team. Fall back. Now. They ran, retreating into the colony's main hall. The doors slammed shut behind them, cutting them off from the horrors outside. But inside was worse. The chamber stretched impossibly high, far beyond the colony's original blueprints. The walls pulsed with an eerie glow, a spiraling mass of veins leading upward into a towering structure of pure, living light. And at its base knelt the colonists. Hundreds of them. Heads bowed. Hands raised. Praying. Their voices joined as one. We serve. We worship. We become. At the center of it all, resting atop a pulsing pedestal of flesh and metal, was the artifact. It was alive. A shifting, writhing mass of pure sentience, glowing with a terrible, unknowable intelligence. It pulsed, sending waves of energy through the chamber, each pulse sinking into the colonists, making them twitch, making them change. Then it turned its attention to them. Not physically, not with any limbs, with its mind. You are late to the awakening. The floor split open, and from its depths something rose. Elias barely had time to process what was happening before a massive, towering figure emerged. It was one of them, a colonist but evolved beyond recognition. Its body was a fusion of flesh and machine, a perfect amalgamation of man and God. It opened its arms. Join us? The walls collapsed inward. The air vibrated with something old and hungry. And then, everything went dark. Elias woke up gasping for air. His body ached, every nerve screaming as if it had been ripped apart and hastily stitched back together. His helmet's visor flickered, trying to recalibrate, feeding him a wave of garbled data. Static buzzed in his earpiece. His squad. He ripped off his helmet. Where the hell was he? The chamber was gone. The colony, the grotesque walls of living metal and flesh, gone. Instead, he was lying on a monolithic slab, surrounded by whispers and movement in the darkness. The ground beneath him was wrong. It pulsed like a heartbeat, warm and damp, shifting as if it were alive. Then the whispering turned into chanting. He awakens. The outsider. The unbeliever. A flicker of light. A ring of robed figures, kneeling in a vast cathedral of impossible architecture, where the walls twisted and grew as if they were breathing. Not human. Not even machine. Something else. Then he saw them. His squad. Arya, Bannon, Niles, and Vasquez, each of them restrained, suspended in midair by tendrils of pulsing light that stretched down from the cavernous ceiling. Their eyes were wide open, bodies rigid. Arya! Elias surged forward, but his legs failed him. His body felt like it was fighting itself, a cold, crawling sensation slithering beneath his skin. One of the robed figures rose. It was human, or had been once. Its face was stretched, its skin embedded with threads of glowing filament. Its eyes were gone, replaced by a single vertical slit of pulsating light. The living artifact has judged you. Elias fought against the weakness dragging him down. The hell are you talking about? The awakening, the figure intoned, stepping closer. You resisted. Yet you were spared. Do you not see? Do you not feel it inside you? Elias' breath caught. Because he could feel it. Something was inside him. A presence, slithering beneath his skin, threading into his nerves, watching him from the inside. It wasn't just in his body, it was in his mind. The whispers weren't coming from the cultists. They were coming from inside him. We are one. You are becoming. No. Elias clenched his fists, forcing his mind to hold onto something real, his team. He locked eyes with Arya, still trapped, her body twitching as if she were fighting something. Then he saw Vasquez's face. The horror hit him like a sledgehammer. Vasquez was changing. Her mouth was open in a silent scream, her skin splitting as luminous tendrils pushed through, threading her veins with something inhuman. The glow spread through her body, warping her, fusing her with the light itself. And then her face shifted. Not just physically. Her expression changed, morphing from terror to serenity. A slow smile stretched across her face, her eyes now twin voids of glowing emptiness. She had become one of them. A fresh wave of rage slammed into Elias, drowning out the whispers. No, his voice was his own again, and his body suddenly moved. He lunged, reaching for his sidearm. Nothing. The cultist in front of him smiled. There is no need for weapons. Elias punched him in the face. The blow cracked against the man's skull, sending him sprawling, and suddenly the entire chamber reacted. The walls shrieked, a piercing, inhuman wail that sent the robed figures into a frenzy. Rejects the gift. Elias didn't stop to listen. He ran for Arya. Bannon stirred, groggy but aware, and his restraints weakened as the energy around them flickered. The artifact's focus was divided now, reacting to Elias' defiance. That was the opening they needed. Move! Elias shouted. Arya broke free first, landing hard and rolling to her feet. Her eyes were wild, sweat dripping down her face. Where the hell are we? Later, Elias growled, yanking Bannon from his bindings. The cultists were recovering, moving toward them in a swarm, their hands outstretched like worshippers seeking communion. Then Vasquez moved. Not Vasquez. Not anymore. She levitated, the remnants of her human form glowing with a terrible, divine energy, and when she spoke, it wasn't in her voice anymore. You cannot stop the ascension. She raised her hand. A shock wave of pure force erupted outward. Elias and his squad were thrown backward, crashing through one of the twisted archways. The impact sent them tumbling into darkness, down a slope of shifting, fleshy ground. The last thing Elias saw before he lost his grip on reality was Vasquez's smile, filled with something older than humanity itself. And then everything collapsed around them. Elias hit the ground hard. His world was a blur of shifting shadows and eerie bioluminescence as he tumbled down a slick, pulsating slope. The surface beneath him felt alive, writhing beneath his weight like the insides of some vast, ancient organism. His ears rang from the impact, his vision swimming with bursts of color that weren't supposed to exist. Somewhere above, the cavernous cathedral of the living artifact shuddered, its walls screaming in protest. He landed hard at the bottom, gasping as he pushed himself up. Arya groaned nearby, rolling onto her side, her rifle miraculously still strapped to her back. Bannon staggered to his feet, swaying as he spat out something dark and viscous. Everyone alive? Elias growled, shaking off the disorientation. Alive? Bannon barked a bitter laugh. Yeah. But I think this place is inside my goddamn head. Arya wiped blood from her lip, her hands shaking. We lost Vasquez? Her voice was hollow. Elias' stomach twisted, but he pushed it down. There was no time for grief. Above them, the light of the cathedral pulsed violently, the air thrumming with the echoes of Vasquez's new voice. You cannot fight the becoming. Elias clenched his jaw. We'll see about that. They were deep in the bowels of the colony now, but nothing was human anymore. The original metal walls of the outpost were mutated, fused with the living material of the artifact's influence. The corridors twisted, warping into spirals that defied geometry, as if the colony itself had been rewritten by an alien hand. Flesh and metal had become one. The deeper they went, the more the whispers returned, crawling under their skin like an infection. This is how it was always meant to be. You resist the gift, but it is already inside you. Elias gritted his teeth. Every time the voice spoke, he felt a flicker of something inside him responding, as if some part of him was listening. That scared him more than anything else. We need a way out, Arya muttered, checking her scanner. But these readings are bullshit. The colony's entire structure has changed. We go down, Elias decided. Whatever this thing is, we need to cut it off at the source. Bannon scoffed. You mean the artifact? The thing that's literally turning people into living gods? Elias turned to him, his voice cold. Vasquez is gone. You want to let that happen to the rest of us? Silence. Then Bannon nodded, jaw tight. Then let's kill this thing. The corridor eventually opened into a massive, pulsating cavern, the true heart of the colony's transformation. Elias had seen some horrifying shit in his time. Rogue AI uprisings, planetary war zones, deep space anomalies that turned men inside out. But this? This was wrong on a level his mind couldn't fully process. At the center of the cavern, embedded in the writhing, fleshy landscape, was the artifact. No longer just a singular object, it had grown, spreading its influence in thick, pulsing veins of energy that snaked through the chamber like arteries. Suspended above it, wrapped in coils of light and organic metal, was Vasquez. Or what was left of her. She hovered, her arms outstretched, her body no longer constrained by human limitations. Her skin was translucent, glowing with the same impossible energy that fueled the artifact. Her eyes, once brown, were now empty voids of pure, searing light. She wasn't Vasquez anymore. You were never meant to resist. Her voice echoed, layered with something inhuman. The cavern walls shuddered in response. Then the colonists emerged. Hundreds of them. Moving in unison, their bodies fused with the living metal, their faces frozen in expressions of ecstasy. They surrounded the chamber, watching, waiting for the ascension to continue. Elias raised his weapon. Bannon, Arya. Hit it with everything you've got. Bannon grinned. Finally, they opened fire. The chamber erupted. Bullets tore into the pulsing tissue, black ichor spraying as the walls screamed in protest. Arya launched an incendiary grenade straight into the heart of the artifact, the explosion igniting the unnatural veins with waves of hungry flame. The effect was instantaneous. The colonists convulsed, their bodies spasming as the flames consumed them. Some collapsed, their flesh melting, while others shrieked in agony, the unnatural energy in their bodies reacting violently to the fire. And Vasquez? She laughed. You cannot burn the divine. She raised her hand, and the fire froze midair. The flames writhed, then reversed, absorbed into her body like sustenance. Then she struck. A wave of pure force blasted outward, sending Elias and his team flying. His vision blurred as he slammed into the ground, the impact stealing his breath. When he looked up, he saw her standing over him. Vasquez, or whatever she had become, gazed down at him with something almost human in her expression. You are almost ready, Elias. Her hand reached toward him. And then the ceiling collapsed. Something big slammed into the chamber from above, tearing through the organic structure like a meteor strike. The walls ruptured, sending a shockwave through the entire colony. The Valkyrie. A desperate transmission crackled through Elias' earpiece. Commander, we have a lock on your position. Get the hell out of there. The drop ship had come back for them. Elias didn't hesitate. Move. Now. Arya and Bannon scrambled, dodging the debris as the cavern collapsed around them. The artifact was wounded, its veins flickering erratically, its influence weakening. Vasquez screamed, not in pain but in fury. You cannot leave. It is not finished. Elias didn't look back. He ran. The drop ship's ramp was open, the pilot shouting for them to hurry. Arya leapt first, Bannon close behind. Elias was seconds away from the ramp when a hand caught his wrist. Vasquez. Or what was left of her. You belong here. Her grip was iron, pulling him toward the abyss, her face filled with something terrifyingly close to affection. Elias did the only thing he could. He pulled his sidearm and shot her point-blank in the head. For a fraction of a second, he saw something flicker in her expression, pain, sadness, recognition. Then she let go. He dove for the ramp as the ship blasted upward, leaving the collapsing hell behind. The last thing he saw before the clouds swallowed the colony was the artifact, pulsing in rage, in sorrow, in hunger. And then Ganymede 6 was gone. Elias slumped against the bulkhead, gasping for air. The Valkyrie shuddered as it rocketed away from Ganymede 6, its thrusters burning hard to escape the gravitational pull of the doomed colony. Every muscle in his body screamed, His vision swam, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He barely registered the alarms blaring in the cockpit. "We're not clear yet," the pilot shouted over the comms. "Something's happening down there." Elias forced himself up and staggered to the viewport. What he saw nearly made his heart stop. Ganymede 6 was moving. The colony, no, the entire goddamn moon, was changing, its surface shifting like a living organism convulsing in pain. Vast tendrils of biomechanical filaments erupted from beneath its crust, reaching outward, stretching toward them. The artifact wasn't just inside the colony. The colony itself had become part of it, and now it was awakening. "Burn everything we've got!" Elias roared. Now. The Valkyrie's weapons systems lit up, missile pods locking onto the writhing surface below. The ship's railguns whined, then fired, spewing hypervelocity slugs into the hellish landscape. For a moment it worked. Explosions rippled across the moon's surface, tearing through organic metal and flesh-like terrain. The tendrils recoiled, retreating like wounded limbs. Then the shockwave hit. A pulse of impossible energy erupted from Ganymede 6, a gravity distortion so powerful it made the Valkyrie lurch violently, alarms screeching in protest. The ship spiraled, metal groaning under the strain as the pilot fought to stabilize the craft. Elias and the others were thrown to the floor. "We're caught in its field," the pilot shouted. "We're not gonna break free." Elias gritted his teeth, mind racing. They were seconds away from being dragged back down, back into the thing's grasp. "You cannot escape." The whisper slithered through his skull, but this time, it wasn't just in his head. It echoed through the ship's systems, crawling into the comms, the electronics, even the lights dimmed as if the artifact was bleeding into the machinery itself. It was inside everything now. Inside him. He looked down at his hands. His veins glowed faintly, just for a second. The influence had touched him back in the chamber. Maybe he had resisted. Maybe he had fought it. But it had never truly let him go. And now it was calling him back. "Elias!" Aria's voice snapped him back to reality. She was gripping his arm, shaking him. "We have to break free." There was only one way. He took a shuddering breath and closed his eyes. And for the first time, he didn't fight the connection. He embraced it. The moment he let go, his mind was flooded with something vast and unknowable. It wasn't just voices anymore. It was memories, knowledge. He saw visions of planets consumed, of civilizations rewritten, of entire galaxies woven into something greater. The artifact had existed before time. It had drifted through the cosmos for eons, waiting, watching, finding new worlds to bring into itself. And now it had found him. "You are ready." "No." Elias gritted his teeth, forcing his will against the suffocating presence. "You want me," he growled. "Then let them go." The presence shuddered. It didn't understand. It had never been defied like this before. He pushed harder, drove his mind into it like a blade. "Let them go." The connection ruptured. A shock wave burst outward, severing the unseen chains holding the Valkyrie in place. The gravitational hold collapsed, and suddenly the ship was free, rocketing away from the dying moon at full burn. The moment the artifact lost its grip, the planet began to break apart. From orbit, the team watched in stunned silence as Ganymede 6 imploded. The surface cracked, enormous fissures splitting across its surface as the living structures of the artifact collapsed in on themselves. The moon's core pulsed one final time, then caved inward, consumed by its own unnatural gravity. And then it was gone. A dead silence filled the ship's cabin. Elias exhaled, his body aching, his mind still buzzing with the aftershocks of what he had done. Bannon broke the silence with a wheezing laugh. "Well, shit. I think we won." Arya didn't smile. She was staring at Elias, at the faint glow that still lingered beneath his skin. He looked away. They had escaped. They had survived. But something inside him had changed. And he had no idea if he could ever go back. Days later, aboard the fleet's medical station, Elias sat in front of the debriefing screen, waiting. The brass wanted answers. Wanted to know what had happened on Ganymede 6. Wanted to know why an entire colony had worshipped something not of this universe, and how it had nearly consumed them all. But there was one thing he hadn't told them, because at night, when he closed his eyes, he still heard her voice. You belong to us now. And deep in the void, far beyond where any ship could go, something stirred.